A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video, but more on that later.
For the past year, I've been watching the way water flows on our land, hiking through the woods after historic rainstorms, and wandering among the trees in the middle of a drought. I'm on the search for a natural spring, a source of free, clean, abundant drinking water that could replace our reliance on a questionable old well. Back in the day, springs were considered sacred, and people would build their houses, towns, and entire villages below a natural spring in order to have a reliable source of gravity-fed drinking water. So the search is on to find the holy grail of any homestead, a high-elevation, high-flow, year-round spring right above a potential house site. So this water right here is actually, I think, almost entirely spring water. And what I want to do is trace the water all the way up the mountain and try and find the very highest spring on the property. I know there's a bunch of springs lower down on the mountain, at least 3 really, really good ones, but the most beneficial spring would be the one that's the closest to our potential future home site. So you can see here that a spring comes from up there and feeds this creek, but the majority of the creek continues up the mountain, so that's the way we're gonna go. So I believe this is what they call a seep. Not 100% sure, but it's basically like a spring, just less concentrated. But you can see the snow makes it really easy to see where the water is flowing from, and it flows from up here and then it stops. So that flows down into the creek down there. So there's actually a pretty substantial fork in the creek right now. Way over there, there's a spring, I think, coming from up the mountain. You can just see the section of snow that's melted right there. And then the creek continues this way, but I think I'm actually gonna follow this creek further up and see if I can find the base of the spring up there. So it's a little hard to see, but the water actually flows in this area from, I think, 3 separate places, which means that we could tap each one and connect the hoses, and we would have triple the flow, which really only matters, I think, if you're using a ram pump, because then you just get way more water going up the hill. All right, I found it. So as of right now, this is the highest spring on the mountain. It's pretty easy to tell in the snow because there's no water up there. The water flows from under this rock and it's really clear. There are a couple additional springs though over here. There's one here, and then I can't tell if this one is basically just the same thing. And then there's 2 more over there. So potentially 4 or 5 spots. But this one looks the most promising just because it's the most contained in a small area. So I think it will be the easiest to develop first. And then we can always come in and develop the other ones in the future. But I have a really good feeling about this one. I'm gonna have to figure out how to get in all the materials I need because we are not close to a road. There are a couple like old logging roads through the forest, so I might see if I can clear one of those off with the chainsaw and get the tractor in here because it would be so much easier transporting materials with the tractor. But you can see like the green area down there flows all the way into the creek, which I followed up the mountain. And I feel like these flow year round, but only time will tell. The creek down there flows year round, so I feel like whatever spring is supporting it the strongest must also flow year round, because even in the middle of like a summer drought, there's water in that creek down there, and it's got to be coming from one of these springs. Hopefully it's this one. So we made it back to the spring right there. It's always a little hard to re-find it. The tractor is way up there in the woods. It's as close as I could get it, still a couple 100 feet. Luckily, at least it'll be downhill carrying supplies, but I had an idea. I think I'm gonna dedicate a half hour to go get the leaf blower, because it's really treacherous walking around here with the snow, the ice, and all these rocks. And two, since the tractor is really not that close to the spring, I think I'm gonna leaf blow this whole area and see if I can just collect rocks right here on site rather than using the bucket on the tractor. So it's a little side project, but I think it will be worth it. So this is a really, really beautiful section of forest. So I got pretty lucky. The source of the spring is under this rock, which means even though this dirt is really hard to dig through, it's actually going to be really easy to build the next step, because I can use the rock as part of it.
Maybe we can drop this one somewhere.
I think you could dig out a little bit better, like slam a huge one in there, potentially get all the water flowing, then dig down here and build it.
Wow. It just didn't look like this much water at all yesterday. So much.
Yeah, I showed Noah, like that's what it looked like.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Stop.
9.3 seconds
9 seconds.
to fill half a gallon.
3 gallons a minute, baby. So my original plan when I was building the spring was to use the large PVC pipe to funnel water out of the area we were building in. And this way we would have like a nice dry area to build a dam, and then insert a couple smaller PVC pipes and capture the water with those smaller pipes, and like the dam would stop the water from flowing down the hill. But I realized, I think about a third of the way in, that the large PVC pipe I put in was working really, really well, because the soil that I dug is this like really hard clay, and the water in the spring just does not penetrate through that. So it was going straight into the funnel I had created for the large pipe. So I kind of pivoted, changed the plan, and decided not to remove the large pipe because it's working so well. And if one day it stops working, then we can just close that pipe, and hopefully the dam will hold and the two smaller pipes will do the job they were designed to do. But what we need to do now is cut that large pipe so it's shorter, so that like a tree branch or an animal or something like that doesn't just like step on it or break it, and downsize the pipe to a much smaller hose that's going to run a couple 100 feet down the hill through the forest to an area where we can fill up our water jugs using the pickup truck on the driveway. So I think what I'm going to do is cut the pipe and downsize it, but downsize it in such a way that the large pipe has basically a built-in overflow mechanism, because I did a lot of research on these springs, and it seems like one of the problems people get into is if the pipe they have coming out of the ground gets clogged or stops for some reason and then backflows, it can actually change the way the water was flowing in the spring and divert it in a different direction. So what you really, really don't want is for that pipe to get obstructed in any way. So I'm going to build an overflow into it so that hopefully that can't happen. All right. Haha. Yes. There we go. Look at that. So it flows down here and flows into this thing. Wow. And then this is the overflow here. So if this one for some reason isn't working, it will feed out there and it won't backflow, which is really, really cool. Whew. Well, it was not easy, but last night I got the spring hose all the way to the driveway. The next step in the process is to test the water and make sure there's no funky bacteria in there. I think I already bought a kit a while ago that will work for that. And I think you can just test it yourself instantly. And yeah, let's read the instructions and find out. So that was 15 seconds, which means we get 4 gallons a minute. That's pretty good. Wow. Crazy. All right, so we have spring water at the shipping containers. We'll have to wait on that water test to see if there's any bacteria in the water, but I did sneak a couple sips and I haven't gotten sick, so that's a good sign at least. And yeah, see what happens.
Maybe test it first.
The dream going forward would be to set up a spring-fed shower down the mountain. It would be super cold, but it would at least be a shower. And one day what I really want to do is set up a ram pump, which is this special kind of pump that basically just uses water pressure to pump water uphill without electricity. It's like really, really cool old school technology, and I'm hoping we can get one in the future. And that way we could just pump the water all the way up the hill and not have to take the truck to go fill jugs, which is gonna get old pretty quickly. But it's a really, really good feeling to finally have spring water at our homestead. A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. My favorite things to build are systems that go on to run themselves, like the spring we just developed and like the Squarespace site we set up years and years ago. Pick a template, add some images and text, and then sit back and relax, because Squarespace takes care of the rest, making sure your website will look great on phones, tablets, and computers, all while updating itself seamlessly in the background. We recently added a new collection of guided meditations to our online store, and as our product library grows, our site grows easily alongside it. To get started on your own website, head to squarespace.com/wildweroam for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.